Oscar Piastri's Formula One career started out just like all the greats of Formula One have, with a funny tweet. I mean, if you don't remember the tweet of Ayrton Senna saying he was going to Skibbity McLaren, what were you doing back in the day? But no, in the olden days of Formula One, by which I mean 2022, Oscar Piastri belonged to the Alpine Driver Academy. Benefits included free wine and cheese, unlimited strike days, and a free trip to France. Wait, hang on a minute. A free trip to France under the benefits? That can't be right. Anyway, but in 2021, Oscar Piastri won the Formula 2 Championship. Yippee! The only problem was none of the F1 teams had a seat available for him, and once you've won Formula 2, you can't compete in it again the next year. So for the 2022 season, Oscar was pretty bored. I mean, he was the reserve driver for Alpine, but all that meant was he did barely anything apart from his mandatory FP1 sessions. Not exactly the most fun you can have as a racing driver. So he was just sat there watching everyone else drive around and have a lot more fun than him. So obviously Oscar was getting pretty bored and was desperate to get into Formula One. Thankfully for Piastri, at the end of the 2022 season, Goat Alonso, the man over here, he realized he hated Esteban Ocon. Any opinions, Fernando?
Esteban, I'm going to put him in bread and make him into a sandwich.
Jesus Christ. Plus, Lawrence Stroll was offering Fernando a fat paycheck, and Alpine couldn't design a sofa, never mind a Formula One car. So off he went to Aston Martin. This meant Alpine announced Oscar Piastri as their full-time driver for 2023. They even put out a tweet saying so. The only problem was, Oscar said, "Not on. Cheers for funding my junior career, guys. But actually, you f***ing suck, and McLaren are really cool, so I'm gonna race for them instead." Average Alpine moment. So for 2023, Oscar Piastri partnered the rising star and rumored future world champion Lando Norris instead of at Alpine over at the debatedly papaya team McLaren. The only thing with Oscar bailing out on Alpine did was actually put him under a shitload of pressure. And there's quite a few different reasons as to why this is. Because there was a bunch of factors now going against him at McLaren. Not only would he be partnering what most people saw as one of the best drivers on the grid, think differently. I'm joking. He also had a year out of racing, which never does you any good. I mean, imagine if you took a year off playing Fortnite. You would be terrible when you came back because all of the children would know how to do something you didn't know how to do, and the updates would change. This is a rant going off topic. Plus, Oscar had also snaked out Alpine, which it never makes you any friends in Formula One, and that's a team that's probably never going to take him back. Then again, they took Alonso back a million times, so basically, if Oscar didn't perform, he's going to look like the clown of the paddock going to McLaren and snaking out his old team. So, how did he do? Was he a race winner on his debut? Was he on the podium in Bahrain? No, he DNF'd in his first ever race. Then proceeded to only finish in the top 10 twice in the next 8 races of the season. And that was with a highest finishing position of 8th at the Australian Grand Prix, which was just chaos anyway. The only saving grace for Oscar was, well, Lando was doing just as bad. It was clear it wasn't a problem with Oscar's driving. The car was just complete arse. So the good thing for Oscar was that as the season continued, McLaren actually managed to improve.
This is a crafting table.
Unlike every other team that's been stuck near the back recently. Fair play to Zach Brown, by the way. He loves to yap. He just loves to yap about how McLaren are going to do so well, but he actually delivered on it. No hate from me, even if he does sound like funny Donald Trump man trying to run an F1 team.
I love Tesla.
Now, as the car got quicker, all of the people who were watching at home, who weren't still screaming about Abu Dhabi 2021 being unfair, because you got to remember, I'm talking about 2023, and 2 years clearly isn't enough to process that. But all of those people watching at home, they started to notice something about Oscar Piastri. He wasn't half bad. Like, usually when you were watching Oscar, he was qualifying within 0.2 of Lando, even occasionally out-qualifying his more experienced teammate, which is something we even saw early in the season at round 2, Saudi Arabia. In that qualifying session, and bear in mind, this was when the car was a pile of dog shit topped with rotten fucking eggs, Oscar somehow managed to make Q3 in Saudi Arabia with that car and qualify in P9, whereas Lando was second to last and out in Q1. However, I'm pretty sure this was the race where at the start, Oscar Piastri got wing damage, and this must be the worst luck in Formula One ever. The broken part of Oscar's wing pinged off and hit Lando's wing and gave him wing damage as well, so both of them had to pit for new front wings. I'm pretty sure that happened in this race. Anyway, later on in the season, there was also the Qatar Sprint, which was where Oscar Piastri, in a season dominated by the Dutch national anthem, I swear to God, if I hear that anthem 5 more times in like a 30-day window, I would probably go become a hermit and live in the woods and never watch Formula One again. At Qatar, he managed to out-qualify Lando Norris, who obviously bottled it, and then went on to win the sprint race. Bear in mind, before Lando Norris had ever won anything in any kind of race format.
Lando, no win.
I mean, how does that look on your future world champion, your #1 driver, when his rookie teammate has won a format of race before him? Obviously, there were some things holding him back, but if you're a race winner like Oscar Piastri, why don't you go hit the subscribe button? It won't make you win anything, but it will make me feel good about myself. While I'm here, I'm just going to do a little yap. Promise it won't take too long. If you are a McLaren fan, I'm affiliated with V12RS, and using code DanNoSkill10 will get you 10% off any official Formula One merch. Plus, obviously, that gives money back into the channel, which I very much appreciate and helps me survive. Also, one last thing I pinky promise you, and then I'll tell you a lot more about Oscar Piastri. Just thank you to these channel members who've been supporting the channel for the past few months. It really does mean a lot, and your support goes a long way. Gotta give them a shout out in every video. That is one of the perks, and like I said, they deserve it, they earn it. I really do appreciate it. Thanks, channel members. Anyway, the only thing that really seemed to hold Oscar back was just the fact he was a rookie and lacked experience. But considering nowadays rookies get 4 seconds of testing and a free pamphlet before joining Formula One, it's pretty impressive that at this stage in his career, Oscar was already so close to Lando Norris. Bit of a side note here, but Oscar's performance always reminds me that we shouldn't really cut the other rookies so much slack. Like, when everyone was going on about Logan Sargent just needing more time to get used to it, I was thinking Oscar Piastri is out here barely like half a millisecond off Norris at some races. I know he's in a better car, but Logan Sargent really has no excuse and can't really use the testing as an excuse when Oscar's also able to do this. Clearly, it's just talent.
Okay, what damage do you have?
Talent.
But when we were seeing this, it's when we first heard the rumor that Oscar Piastri might actually be better than Lando Norris. I mean, sure, at the time, he obviously wasn't. Even if his pace was good, it was the tire management and how complex that is in modern Formula One that would hold him back, because you basically have to dance around on these tires if you want to make them last 5 laps. So on race pace, Lando Norris had quite a big advantage over Oscar. But that was why he needed his rookie season, and the idea was that in 2024, we'd see a big step up for Oscar. They say in modern Formula One, it takes 2 full seasons to get fully used to driving the F1 car. So for his second year in Formula One, all Oscar really had to do was make little tiptoe steps towards Lando Norris's full pace. And well, he did a bit fucking more than that, didn't he? Lando did establish himself as a title contender for 2024. And despite most drivers like Lando probably wanting their teammate to back them up in a title fight, Oscar just tried his best to get in the way of Lando Norris as much as he possibly could. Which honestly, I'm not complaining about because the racing was mega. Lando was sat there trying to prove himself as team leader of McLaren. And then Oscar would go fuck him off at the race start in Hungary.
Oh, hello there.
Drive quicker than him and then have the team back him up to get the position back when Lando undercut him because McLaren did their best Ferrari strategist impression that day and just caused an unneeded amount of tension between their drivers. At the end, Norris did look a little bit embarrassed because he'd just thrown a massive hissy fit all race over the radio. Again, I'm not going to pin this on either driver. That was just a McLaren blunder and they shouldn't have put themselves in that position. But then going into Italy, this stuff continued because Oscar at the start of the race just sent it, absolutely sent it on his teammate, which is probably like rule number -1. Don't send it on your teammate. He didn't care. And he took the lead of the race. And the only reason he missed out on the win was because Ferrari, for once, got their strategy right and managed to keep Leclerc ahead. You know what they say, a broken clock is right twice a day. But then going into Azerbaijan, after all these controversies of the team not prioritizing Lando, McLaren finally came out and went, look, we are going to give Lando Norris the priority. You know, in Azerbaijan, Oscar Piastri will just be there to help Norris. But then Lando got knocked out in Q1, which in all fairness, it wasn't his fault. It was Esteban Ocon's car doing French car things. Just average Renault moment.
Esteban on the podium.
Baby.
And the yellow flags came out at a terrible time. I bet at that moment, Oscar was thinking, thank God I really didn't sign for Alpine because they truly are arse.
You'll see that you have moved up above Alpine and more points scored today than the rest of the season combined. This,
you know, we don't want to be finishing 5th in.
But with Lando out in Q1, Oscar lined up on the front row of the race, overtook Leclerc, then held him up with a defense wide Fernando Alonso would be proud of, and took the win in Azerbaijan, a race where McLaren came out and said they would prioritize Lando. Even if the Q1 thing wasn't Norris's fault, do you know how embarrassing that has to look when you're trying to be the team leader in a Formula One team? What an absolute mad lad. Oscar putting in the performances when he needed to. Don't get me wrong, there was still teething problems. It wasn't all smooth sailing. I mean, just look at the championship standings. Oscar was quite a bit off Norris. He was quite a bit off the lead of the championship too, just because he wasn't quite yet up to that same pace as Lando. There'd be the occasional race where Oscar made some mistakes or just didn't quite look on the same pace, or he just seemed to cook those tires a little bit too fast. But overall, to embarrass Lando that many times over the season, well, that's only going to add fuel to the Oscar Piastri hype train. Now, looking back, was Lando Norris the clear #1 driver? Well, yes, he was. Like I mentioned, he outscored Oscar by a mile and actually pushed Van Strappen to fight for his title rather than just 2023 where Max could eat a McDonald's mid-race and still win. And obviously that was something Oscar wasn't able to do. Van Strappen would have won the championship easily if we just went off Oscar's points. But did Oscar do enough in 2024? Did he get to the end of those 2 seasons and no longer look like a new rookie in the sport, but a more experienced, more well-rounded F1 driver? Well, fuck yeah, he did, obviously. And 2025 is going to provide him with a bunch of opportunities. And I'm going to say the word here. I'm going to say the phrase that you probably shouldn't because it gets people way too excited and way too emotional, but he has a chance of becoming world champion. I mean, just talking 2024 and his performance, he helped McLaren secure that constructors title. Without him, Ferrari might have won it. Maybe even Red Bull would have come back and won it. So Oscar had to be on his top game, even though he's still quite new to F1. So let's talk 2025 title fight. As everyone has been saying, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out. Oscar clearly has world champion potential. And most people who we would probably all agree on have like more than an ounce of wheel knowledge, and people who aren't permanently fixated on Lando Norris's hair, they probably agree that Oscar Piastri has more potential than Lando Norris. Even before the first race of 2025, Oscar Piastri has been given basically everything he's needed by McLaren to go, look, we've got the faith in you, and probably given him a huge boost in confidence, because before even the first race of this season, McLaren announced a contract extension for Oscar Piastri. Do you know how good that must feel as like a young driver in Formula One? To get an extension before the season start is basically a team going, hey, look, mate, we fully believe in you. We fully support you. You've got this. That's why we want to keep you our team for as long as we can. It's basically Zach Down getting down on his hands and knees and bowing to you as a driver. If you thought that joke was going somewhere else, you are a dirty-minded person. The other reason 2025 tips the scales back in Oscar's favor is the points. The slate is now wiped clean. Lando Norris can no longer go, I've got more points by like 6 skibidi-alien miles, or I'm fighting for a championship and Oscar's not, as a reason to be the #1 ahead of Oscar. So you can no longer ask the team for Piastri to give up positions or not fight him, like what was happening near the end of 2024, which again, I don't blame McLaren for. That's exactly what you have to do to win a Constructors or a Drivers' Championship in Formula One. But now the table battle is even. And if I was going to pick any team to drive for that would let me fight my teammate for a world championship, I would pick McLaren. Look back into their history. They allowed Senna and Prost to basically fight each other as hard as they wanted, as long as they didn't use a gun. And even in more modern times, Lewis and Fernando going at it in 2007 was with McLaren. I mean, in all fairness, McLaren not picking a #1 in that season cost them the championship, but funny Fernando and Lewis bald picture. Seriously, not only were they competing for the championship, they were also competing for who had the worst haircut. So McLaren do have this sort of reputation of letting the drivers fight, letting them go at it for the championship. And I think, at least from what he says in the media, Zach Brown is surprisingly willing to uphold this legacy. At least until it gets to a point of jeopardizing the team's constructors or maybe even driver's title. We're yet to see them have a proper shot at the title. Van Strappon, it was kind of his to lose last year. So he'll probably let the teammates fight, and that means Oscar is at the perfect place to potentially uproot a #1 driver and take over that position. So of course, let's talk about some of the races of 2025. As of me recording, there's only been 2. And whether Oscar realistically does have a shot at the 2025 World Championship.
But I want it now!
Now, despite me singing the praises of Mr. Pastrami over here, Lando Norris has also been improving over the 100 Grand Prix starts he's had. Lando just seems to be gaining more confidence. He seems to be improving in the mental department rather than in the skill department. Norris is quick over a lap. He's learned to defend the start of the race now. He's got a lot better at that. And finally, he's just become better at controlling and leading a race. He seems a lot more calm now he's achieved that first win and done it a couple times. So with Norris making less mistakes, it's a little bit stupid to not consider him the favorite for the title, or at least a very strong contender to Oscar Piastri. Now, we were down under in Australia for race 1, which I'm assuming most of you know because you probably watched it live like me, or at least the Channel 4 highlights. But bear in mind, the Channel 4 highlights are literally just, hey guys, here's some racing. Also, here is 7 years of adverts. Buy this. Okay, back to the racing. Okay, here's 7 more years of adverts. British fans, you will understand. But Lando took pole in Australia with Oscar in second, and bear in mind there was less than a 1/10 of a second gap between them, which is basically an ant. That's like Oscar might have had a bit of a slide coming out of one of the corners, or maybe missed an apex by a millimeter. And then as they set off to start the race, Oscar didn't exactly fall miles back from Lando Norris. For most of the race, Oscar was giving Lando a big old sniff through Albert Park. And that is exactly the type of racing we needed to be seeing for Oscar's 3rd year in Formula 1. And as he has done for the past 2 years, he provided. Now, obviously, you're probably saying, Dan, you're ignoring the elephant in Sector 3 of the racetrack, the fact that Oscar only finished 9th. Because he did. Funny. Like, look, this was a stupid mistake from Oscar. No one's denying that. But I am going to cut him a little bit of slack. Number one, it's not like he did a Liam Lawson. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to finish 20th and qualify last. But also, Oscar's incident was right as the rain started to fall on a dry track. So obviously he was on dry tires, but also he was only the 2nd car to pass through this part of the track with that level of rain on it. So he didn't really have anyone else to reference or what he could expect from them. Plus, he couldn't even copy what Lando was doing, which he probably did following him, because Baldo went off into the gravel anyway. He was basically just luckier than Oscar to not end up in the grass too. Plus, Oscar then used his reversing skills he'd learned on Clarkson's farm.
We wanted to see if he could reverse that trailer into that slot in the barn. How long has he been doing it? 40 minutes?
40 minutes now.
To get back in the race and actually score some motherfucking points, baby! Which are crucial, you know? Those 2 points might end up being massively important in the championship. So I'm gonna let him off with that mistake in Albert Park, especially considering his performance in
China.
Oscar out-qualified Lando Norris in the sprint, then finished 2nd in the sprint, making up a position. When Lando bottled his start, classic Lando Norris, and got stuck behind Lance Stroll, of all people, for the majority of the sprint race. Then after that, when McLaren fixed their setup for the actual race, Oscar was like, oh shit, yeah, I do know how to drive, don't worry. Beat Lando for pole position, mad lad, and then took off from the race start, comfortably in control, basically just managed, was a chill guy for like the whole race, even though it was only going to be his 3rd Grand Prix win if he won it. And for the whole time, time maintained a 3-second gap to the bald man. Yes, I know fans of Mr. Perm who are watching this video will argue that at the end of the race, Norris had brake issues and could have caught to Oscar, but realistically, I don't think he was ever going to catch enough to overtake. I think Oscar was doing a pretty good job of managing that gap at around 2.5 to 3.5 seconds. So Oscar took a beautiful win in
China.
and it was a dominant drive similar to what we'd see Max Verstappen do in 2023. And this is with Oscar having a teammate who, let's be honest, is far more competent than Sergio Perez. So that's why I would put him as a serious contender, and probably at the moment Lando's closest competition, apart from maybe Max and George, who just have this unrivaled consistency recently, constantly ended up on the podium. Like, even if Van Strappen and George Funny Pose Russell are ahead of Oscar in the championship at the moment, as of writing this script, it is literally 2 points that separate all 3 of those cars. That's how close Oscar is to second in the title. I think that the pace and those rumors of Oscar being faster than Lando Norris, they could hit Norris hard this season. And that gives Oscar every chance to outperform Norris that he can. And every time he does, obviously it's going to take a toll on Norris's mental state. So it's going to be a battle of also mental willpower as well as just performance out on track. The only thing I do see Oscar still struggling with, just because of his lack of experience in Formula 1, is probably just his consistency. With less experience, obviously comes more mistakes. There's more situations you haven't yet encountered in Formula 1. And that's where Norris and Max, and at this point maybe even George Russell, will have to take advantage of Piastri. Out of context, saying George will have to take advantage of Piastri, that does sound a little bit wrong, so please don't clip that. But who do you think has it? Will Lando Norris just be the clear WDC this season? I highly doubt it. I think Ferrari as well are yet to make their comeback. Or will Oscar Piastri maybe have the season of legends and outperform Lando, which would really hurt Lando's reputation? Or will Max just do Max shit and win because Verstappen? Or will George Russell all over the track and somehow come away with a championship? If I know. But if you're down there commenting why I'm wrong and Liam Lawson is about to have the comeback of the century and become world champion, make sure you also give the subscribe button a little pressy press. Maybe even sniff the membership join button as well. I've got to say again, a big thank you to those guys. I very much do appreciate their support. They are complete legends of the channel, and I truly appreciate what they do. You can also check out this video, which I promise you is really cool. It's on screen now. All right, have a lovely rest of your day, everybody, and goodbye.